Now, when we're talking about staff, I want to talk about culture. For the rest of this podcast episode, I really want to dive into what is culture, what are the ingredients. Let's start with kind of defining culture. And I can't even think of this. Now, much like the culture in a petri dish, staff culture creates an environment that determines what behaviours and practices grow and thrive within a team and what doesn't. So just as certain conditions in a petri dish foster the growth of specific organisms, the values, the beliefs, and the practices in your workplace culture nurture certain attitudes and actions and outcomes. Now, culture is made up of three different elements. And if we're missing any of these three different elements, a bit like a three-legged stool there too, our stool is going to fall over, or in this case, our culture is going to have something missing. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast, the podcast where I have the pleasure of simplifying the marketing and the mindset so you, the chiropractor, can increase your income, your impact, and your enjoyment in practice too. In today's episode, I want to talk with you all about culture. Over this last quarter, inside of Community Influencer, we've been doing a deep dive into the three ingredients of winning chiropractic teams. And I've been coaching and supporting chiropractors to create and design the culture that they actually want to have inside of their practice. Now, culture, the environment, we're going to dive exactly into what I mean by that, and we will go into those three ingredients. But before we go into that, I want to talk about the big challenges that we have as chiropractors. I want to show you where this all fits in, okay? Because sometimes we spend our effort, our energy, our time, our finances working on the wrong thing. So I want you to imagine a triangle drawn in front of you here. These three sides of the triangles are the thing that we need to have mastery around if we want to build the practice of our dreams, a thriving practice, whatever success looks like for you, okay? So let's start with the first side of this triangle. What we need to first have mastery over is message. We need to be able to answer the question, why should someone come and see you? Okay, you need to know that really, really clearly. They're going to pass a number of other practitioners, possibly other chiropractors, but certainly other health practitioners. And why should they come and see you? Now, when you're answering this question, it's not about saying that you're better than these other practitioners, but it is saying that this is, again, you're probably best for that person, okay? So think about it in terms of answering with a great deal of confidence and competence. Now, if you can't answer that question, you don't move forwards, okay? If you can't articulate why someone should come and see you, then that's probably where your attention and your conversion problems come from. So we don't need to get onto kind of communication, report of findings. We don't need to get onto re-exams or any of those type of things. We need to start off first by saying, why should somebody come and see you, okay? Who are you perfect for? Now, once you've got some clarity in around that, we're still on this first side of the triangle here. What we then need to do is broadcast that to the world. So we need to tell the world about it. This is really what we call marketing, okay? Now, there are many different ways that you can do that, from social media to events to internal referrals to, corporate health talks. And we've covered those things numerous times throughout this podcast, okay? So that's side number one that we get. Now, once we've got that down and solved, what we then need to work on is the next side of the triangle, and this is conversion and retention. So conversion is, how do we take those people that are leads coming into our practice, and how do we start to get them coming towards or invite them towards becoming chiropractic lifers? I really like the idea of making lots of invitations. There's a tendency in lots of the communication strategies for them to push towards manipulation, forcing people in there. And we do that with the very best of intentions because we know that chiropractic is wonderful. And the longer somebody's under chiropractic care, the better it is for them. And obviously the better it is for our business as well. But when we push towards manipulation, whilst that will get us short-term results, it never gets us to where we want to be. I was having a chat with a chiropractor recently whose conversion numbers were outstanding, and yet, she looked over the last 90 days, she just really wasn't feeling good about it because she knew that she'd defaulted back to some really high-pressure sales tactics to make it happen. And whilst this will give a real burst in numbers to come with, the retention down the road is going to be caught. So we'll have a lot of people dropping off at the initial kind of re-exam. them, okay? So we need to find a way that we can convert and retain people into care in a way that feels really aligned for us. So that's the second side we need mastery on. Now, the third side here, and we're going to talk about now, is really systems and leadership, and that's where culture fits into it, okay? If we don't have a team to support us in this journey, there's only so far that we can actually go. We're much more likely to get burnt out, exhausted, overwhelmed. Things just aren't fun. You know, there's a saying that if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, you need to build a team. If you have a mission where it really is about impact, making a difference with people in your community, it can be tricky trying to do that all by yourself. Now, I know there's a great trend in chiropractors wanting to run solo practices where it's just one practitioner and no staff. And if that's done for the right reasons, I'm a big fan of that. But often that comes out of old wounds. We haven't had the skill sets to be able to manage and hire staff to support them and lead them. And so therefore, instead of learning the skills, we just say that's not for me. And if that's you that's listening to this, I want to encourage you, there is a way that you can bring staff into your practice where it actually adds to things. It's beneficial. It's not a weight. It's an investment per se there too, okay? Now, when we're talking about staff, I want to talk about culture. For the rest of this podcast episode, I really want to dive into what is culture, what are the ingredients of culture as well, okay? So let's start with kind of defining culture. And I can't even think of this. Now, much like the culture in a petri dish, staff culture creates an environment that determines what behaviors and practices grow and thrive within a team and what doesn't. So just as certain conditions in a petri dish foster the growth of specific organisms, the values, the beliefs, and the practices in your workplace culture nurture certain attitudes and actions and outcomes while they also inhibit others. So a healthy culture cultivates positive growth and collaboration, and as an unhealthy culture, a poor culture, can stifle progress and it can breed dysfunction. Now, culture is made up of three different elements, okay? And if we're missing any of these three different elements, a bit like a three-legged stool there too, our stool is going to fall over, or in this case, our culture is going to have something missing, okay? Now, the first of these I refer to as optimized to win, and this is really what this episode is going to be all about, optimized to win. The second is we need to create an environment of safety and belonging. And the third is purpose and value-driven performance. Okay, so let me just say those three again. The first is the team must be optimized to win. The second is we must create an environment of safety and belonging. And the third, we need to have purpose and value-driven performance. But in this particular episode, we're going to really dive into optimized to win. Now, when you're missing elements of any of these three, there are certain signs that will show up. And the first is there'll be a toxic culture. The culture will have negativity. There'll be distrust that will permeate the environment. Your employees are going to feel unsupported there too, undervalued. Maybe they even feel threatened. This can lead to high turnover. It can lead to a lack of morale. It certainly leads to lack of collaboration. So there's a toxic environment. So again, if these things sound familiar, then chances are that you're suffering with a culture problem as well. The second is that there's it becomes stagnant. The environment becomes stagnant. So there's no growth, there's no learning, there's no development. All of these things come to a halt. And there's very little, if any, innovation. Okay, so if you're still doing the same thing this year in practice that you're doing last year in practice, then that's a lack of innovation. And for a practice to grow, it needs to be changing and evolving, because what worked last year is not necessarily going to be working this year, okay? So a stagnant practice is one that has a culture problem. And the third sign that you'll have if you're not having optimal culture there too, is there will be friction. Okay, now what is it that friction looks like? There's a constant struggle to achieve alignment and collaboration. There'll be miscommunication. There'll be conflicting priorities. There'll be a lack of shared vision as well. This often shows up, and again, when I'm talking this culture here, please don't be thinking just about your CAs. This is about your chiropractic associates as well. If there's competition for new patients, if it's this is my new patient and what are you doing? If there's that sort of friction in there, then that's a sign of really poor culture. Now, when you've really worked at creating the culture that you want, the culture that you've designed and gone out of your way, then there are certain signs of that as well. And the first is there's a really lovely supporting environment, okay? So this will be one in which your employees feel valued, okay, heard, They'll feel empowered as well. So the environment as team members are really encouraged to take risks and share ideas. So this is where you'll feel, whether it be CAs or DCs, will come up to say, what about we try this? I want to try something different, new, a new way of reaching out to the community, a new event as well. So, and not only will they be doing this professionally, but you'll see this bleeding over into their personal lives as well. There's a really lovely sense of community. There's mutual respect, collaboration. There's strong relationships. There's a real resilience, okay? And this resilience is important because this means the team can actually weather challenges together. Part of a growing practice is that we will come up against challenges. That's just part of life, okay? We don't want a life without challenges, but we want the resilience to be able to cope with them, and having the right sort of culture is essential for this. The second thing that we'll see when we've got our culture all dialed in is that it's thriving, okay? So both the team and the organization are continuously growing and evolving, okay? There's a palpable sense of energy and excitement. People are motivated, and innovation flourishes, okay? These are the signs. A thriving practice is one where culture is really, really dialed in there too. And the third one I like to think about is harmony, okay? So what is it that harmony looks like as well? This smooth collaboration. When I think about harmony, first of all, before I go into this, like imagine an orchestra playing, and we've got the string section and the woodwork, and we've got the percussion, we've got all of that kind of happening. And there's a real harmony where each of those playing by themselves is beautiful, but when they come together, it creates something that's literally magic, okay? So smooth collaboration, clear communication, shared vision. When everybody is aligned and working together towards common goals, there's less conflict. There's way more progress, and this harmony creates a really positive work environment where your staff are going to feel fulfilled, and this will lead to sustained success inside your practice, okay? So when there's poor culture, it's toxic, it's stagnant, and there's friction. And when we've optimized that culture, it's supportive, it's thriving, and there's harmony as well. Now, one of the key components I want to talk about is this idea of optimized to win. And what does this mean, and what am I referring to, optimized to win? A real penny dropped for me a little while ago when I came across a quote from Patty McCord. Now, she was at Netflix, did an incredible job in helping the culture, the HR at Netflix turn from what was quite a toxic environment to one that became one of the most highest performance in terms of output, but also enjoyable places to work. And here's a quote directly from Patty. She says, there's a big difference between a team and a family. Teams change regularly and are optimized to win at all times, while families strive to stick together no matter what. Now, this language here, I'll say that again, there's a big difference between team and a family. Teams change regularly and are optimized to win at all times, while families strive to stick together no matter what. Now, this idea of family, this is the type of language that we often refer to when we're thinking about our staff in our practice. We want to have and bring people in as a part of the family. Now, the challenge with this is that we put up with behaviors from family that we would never put up with anyone anywhere else. So families are optimized to stick together, okay? So, we put up with the behaviors of our mum, our dad, our brothers, our sisters, because they're family, and we want to stick together and love them no matter what. Now, that works really great for a family, but when that environment starts to happen inside of a practice, it causes an enormous amount of problems. Now, just about every challenge that I talk to chiropractors about with regards to their culture and their practice comes from this distinction. They have optimized for family. And so the behaviors from their staff, okay, there's this real challenge because this is the behavior that I would put up with a family member and kind of just brush it off and say, oh, that's just mum. Sometimes she does that. Sometimes she turns up late all the time, or mum doesn't follow through with things, or sometimes, dad can be crabby in the mornings, and that works there. But when we have a staff person that we're beginning to have that same type of language around, we're in real strife. So I want to talk to you about, because there's some pros and cons of each of this. And as I start to lay this out for chiropractors, when many of them think about this idea of optimized to win, because that's like a sporting team, okay? When we're on a sporting team, whether it be basketball or football or NFL, you name it from there too, if you're not holding up your end of the deal, you're cut from the team and you moved on, okay? Now that can sound quite cold, And that's why we need to have those other elements there of safety and belonging, where it's built around, values and purpose, okay? But there are pros and cons, and let me talk to you through some of these as well. So optimized to stick together, optimized for family. The pros of that is it creates some really strong bonds, okay? So it's nice to feel like a family. This close-knit group, it fosters really deep personal connections. And I know over the years, some of the CAs that have worked for me have been some of the closest relationships that I've ever had. It can foster a really strong sense of loyalty and commitment to each other as well. And this leads to long-term relationships. So it means that we're not forever, re-employing people and having to go through that as well. There can be really lovely emotional support. So a family-like environment can provide emotional support, especially during challenging times. I'm sure there's been times with your CAs or your chiropractors where they've been through a rough time and you've been able to support them, and vice versa as well. So there's lots of really great things about it. And the heart-centered nature of us as chiropractors and what we're doing, we tend to really shift towards this, okay? But there are some downsides to it, and let's talk about these as well. And this is complacency. So a model that's optimized to stick together can lead to complacency and underperformance because we tolerate things that we normally wouldn't or shouldn't tolerate in a business environment, okay? It means very often there's conflict avoidance. So difficult conversations and decisions are often avoided. And this means that we can't behavior change. If we can't correct somebody on the behavior that they're taking, if we can't teach them, if they're not up for change from there too, then growth is absolutely stifled from there too. And then the third thing that happens is there's a real lack of accountability. So performance standards are going to be inconsistent, leads to a lack of accountability and uneven work quality. So we might say, hey, listen, this is how we want the checkout done for the report of findings, or this is what the recommendations, or we want our chiropractors to make sure they do this on the initial consultations. But if there's no accountability, if we're not checking on it, this is the same as, we've all been in those situations through high school and through university where we had a teacher teach us a number of things and somebody asked a question, will this be on the exam? And the teacher says, no, you won't be tested on this. The moment that we're not tested on something, we don't go about learning it. The test is accountability. If we want somebody to actually implement and embody something, there must be accountability. And so that means that if we put a new procedure into the practice, we need to know how we're going to be following up on this, and there needs to be consequences if we don't follow up on it as well, okay? So again, what are the pros of optimized to stick together as well? Strong bonds, loyalty, and emotional support. Okay, that's the pros. The cons are complacency, conflict avoidance, and a lack of accountability, okay? So let's look at optimize to win, okay? So this is a team we're creating here, not a family. This is a team that we're creating. We tend to, or we open up the availability for high performance because there's clear expectations, there's a great job description, there's KPIs, and this ensures everybody knows where they're going and they have the ability to work at their best, okay? There's a focus on continuous improvement, okay? So the focus on winning drives this continuous improvement, innovation, and growth within the team as well. And the third one is it creates a really fulfilling work environment. Now, whilst it can absolutely be challenging, this environment leads to a deep sense of fulfillment as the employees, all of us are seeing tangible results in their efforts. Now, there's a saying, give a person a ladder and they will climb it. Now, healthy individuals want to get better at things. Now, notice here, I'm talking about healthy individuals. And so we want workplace enjoyment. We want fulfillment. We want to feel like we're making an impact and a difference. We want the joy that comes from us getting better at things. And when we're optimized to win, when we have clear expectations, job descriptions, KPIs there as well, when we see that continuous improvement as well, it's incredibly fulfilling. Now, yes, is there something lovely about optimized to family as well? There is, but I'm going to suggest you leave the family for the person's family, and this is work. This is about optimized to win, and we've got important work to do. Now, there can be, if we don't know how to manage it, there can be some cons to optimize to win as well. And the first is there can feel like there's a lot of pressure. The drive to win can create a high-pressure environment, which may be stressful for some employees, okay? So again, if that person doesn't have the skills, if they don't have the drive, if the environment isn't safe and belonging from there too, there can be pressure. Now, this can lead to the second thing, there can be a lot of turnover. So the team-orientated approach leads to higher turnover because underperformers are let to go, okay? So it's not that we're pushing them away. It's we invite them to come along, and if they don't keep up, then there's a better job for them somewhere else. And we've got to help them get into that environment as well. Now, again, if it's not managed properly, there can also be perceived coldness. So without proper communication and culture building, remember there's those three elements as well. This approach can be perceived as cold and overly demanding, all right? So let's review that again. Optimized to win, what are the pros to it? High performance, continuous improvement, and it can absolutely be a fulfilling work environment. But the downside of that, the cons, is there can be pressure, there can be turnover, and there can be perceived coldness that is happening as well. Now, in order for your team to be optimized to win, there's three ingredients that you need to have. There's three things that you need to put in place. So if this is ringing a bell for you, if you're thinking this is what's been missing in my practice and I want to transition to this, these are the three things you need to put in place. And the first is really clear expectations. What is it that you actually want your staff to be doing, whether it be the chiropractors or the CAs? How do you want them doing it? So this is job roles, job descriptions, really clear KPIs. We need to have a roadmap for them that shows them what success is going to look like, as opposed to expecting them to read your mind, okay? We expect families to read our mind. We don't expect our team members to read our mind as well. The second thing, after we have the clear expectations, is we need the necessary training and resources. So if I want you to be able to behave and perform like this, I need to give you the training and the resources. So this is the only thing, if we've chosen the right person, that holds them back from being able to do the task is time and resources. And so, this is you putting together the right office manuals or policies, having the right coaches or mentors to go through this. It's regular team meetings, it's in-services, it's weekends away, it's all of those sorts of things there too. And the third part of this is accountability. I talked about that beforehand. Without accountability, none of this works because we just don't have the follow through, okay? If we want to take things seriously, we need to make sure that we have accountability. So if we decide that we want to have a team that's optimized to win, those three things are clear expectations, necessary training and resources, okay, and then accountability. Now, I want to give you some time for some reflective questions as we start to kind of wind all of this up, okay? My first question is this. If you look back on what you've done up until now, have you been building a team or have you been building a family? Have a think now about the challenges that you've had in your practice, and did they come from you being a team or did they come from the fact that you are optimizing for a family? Now, as I mentioned to you before, I have a lot of conversations with chiropractors each and every week, and just about all of the team problems they have come because they've optimized for family. They've got themselves into a sticky situation there where they've had staff people who've been around for way too long, who refuse to play as a team. There's friction inside. People are all fighting for themselves there too. There's bitchiness that's going on. There's a lack of accountability and there's a lack of training and resources there too. And so then we need to start that arduous task of moving and transitioning from optimized for family into optimized to team. And so this leads to the next question. Where do you want to be from now? Like, do you want to actually optimize for team? Where do you want them to be? Like if you were to, obviously if you're driving at the moment, don't do this, but if you were to shut your eyes and envision an optimal team, make a list of all the things that would differentiate that from what you've got going currently, okay? And then you can start to ask yourself, how could I get there? Would it be through increased collaborative efforts or is it more solitary work? Of course, it's going to be through collaboration, okay? Do you need a new team person? Do you need to onboard someone? Are there more team meetings or less team meetings? Now, sometimes it's a lot less team meetings. I hear a lot of chiropractors, or it's certainly higher quality meetings. So what are the things you need to figure out? What are the job descriptions you want people? What are the KPIs and how could you go about measuring those as well? The next thing to start to think about in advance is what might you and your team find difficult about this transition and how could you prepare for that? One of the best things to do when you're going through change is to think about where are the speed humps going to be and how am I going to pivot, change, slow down when those speed humps come? That way we want to kind of minimize any of the surprises, okay? So you could start to have this conversation with your staff. Hey, listen, I think there's a better way for us to work together. In the past, we've been optimized for family, and there's some great things about that, but there's also some downsides. I think I can make work more fulfilling, more enjoyable. We can grow more, we can impact more. And when I build this in with safety and belonging and purpose and value there too, I think I can make this an even more enjoyable place for you to work. But what is it that you feel, concerned about as we move towards this? You can start to have these conversations going forwards as well. And then you can start to begin this transition as well. So let's sum all of this up, okay? The culture of your practice is an environment. Depending on the culture, different things either grow and thrive, and maybe they're the things that we want, or things perish and die. Culture is made up of three distinct things: optimized to win, okay, safety and belonging, and performance and value-driven action, okay? Today, we talked about this idea of optimized to win, and I differentiated the idea of optimized for family, which is to stick around, okay? So we have a saying with our kids is there's nothing they can do that will ever stop us from loving them, okay? Nothing. But that is not the case with my team, okay? And certainly when I say loving them in terms of keeping them there are certain behaviors that they could do that means they need to be dismissed. They're not part of this team. We have a vision and a mission here with the practice, and we have expectations of the staff, and we all need to be working towards. And if you're not behaving in this way and not aligned with that too, then so be it. Let me help you find another job elsewhere, okay? Optimized to win does mean that we need to have clear expectations, we need to have training and resources, and we need to have accountability to go through that too. So think back over your time as a chiropractor and the challenges that you've had with their staff. Where have they come from? Optimized from family or optimized to win? And if you want to begin that transition phase there as well, how can you involve your staff in this? How can you get them excited about it? How can you coach them? How can you create great safety and belonging inside of there? Okay, folks, that's it for this episode. As always, thank you for all that you do. Please keep saving lives. And just a side note, if you want a hand with this as well, this is the sort of work that we do inside of Community Influence. The Community Influencer members, we went through the 7-step process of actually transitioning your team. There are implementation guides on this. There are job descriptions and KPIs and ways that we go about accountability measuring. These are all the fun things that we do inside of Community Influence. If you'd like to find out more about Community Influencer and have a chat with me to see if it's right for you and team, then send me an email, angus@adiomedia.com, and we can talk about if Community Influencer can help you grow your practice, your impact, and your income. All right, folks, until next time, love you lots. See you soon. Bye. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching Program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.